Okay, so welcome to this live stream today. Lots of things have happened in the world of sport in the last few days and weeks. Obviously, we've had all these cancellations of sporting events because of the coronavirus. The big talking point is European football and the fact that there is no real unified strategy on wage deferrals and salary cuts when non-playing staff are losing their jobs. And this is a gathered pace all week, and there's been several rounds of talks with the PFA and the Premier League here in England. And on Thursday, it was reported that the PFA was advising players not to take voluntary pay cuts, not to defer wages, and the talks collapsed. And then the response in the media, social media, like Facebook, Twitter, and such, was very, very negative towards the PFA. And they've now come back to the negotiating table. It looks like a 30% pay cut will be brought in for players at a variety of clubs. It's still too little, too late, and not enough. Other sports, which get paid a lot less, are taking anywhere up to 70, 80% pay cuts. So European football, while Barcelona have done this thing where their players are taking a 70% pay freeze or whatever, it's all PR because UEFA still want to get the European club seasons restarted by the end of June, which is highly unlikely. Broadcasters are panicking because they're losing subscriptions. If their subscription TV channels like BT and Sky, the free-to-air channels are worried as well because they're losing viewers. So if they've got domestic cup competitions or other sports, they're losing viewers, and it all revolves around money. And the PFA and the agents were advising the players until last night to not take pay cuts. And the damage to the image of football, especially, is I think permanent. I don't think fans will tolerate the exorbitant wages players are being paid in the future. I don't think they can get away with it anymore. And BT Sport, Sky here in England at least, are trying to claw back as much money as possible because they're losing subscribers rapidly because there's nothing to watch. Some of the other channels that are free to wear, I mean, ITV here in the UK are going to be replaying every match from Euro '96, which was a fun tournament to watch as a kid, I will admit, but I don't particularly want to watch Gareth Southgate cry every time because that was depressing then, is depressing now. All serious now, when do you think the soccer came on? Right, well, initially they said we're going to suspend the season until April the 30th. That's when they wanted to get going again. We're 2-3 weeks behind Italy. Now, Italy were planning to be in lockdown until April the 3rd. That's been and gone. UEFA have come out and said they want to restart all 55 European leagues that play in UEFA competitions by sometime between May and the 30th of June. Again, looking highly unlikely. And with the lack of direction at a European level on wage deferrals and wage cuts, only one club in England so far has the players have voluntarily taken a pay cut, even though the PFA were advising them against that, and that was Birmingham City of 50%. They're on a lot less salary than the Premier League players because they're in the Championship. Two other clubs have since followed suit. Other clubs are concerned about if they're rebuilding a new stadium, like Brentford are trying to get their new stadium built as soon as possible. They're worried about getting their stadium completed, considering that their old stadium, Griffin Park's going to be knocked down. So they're concerned about that. But I think the issue that the FA is facing is they've lost revenue because the FA Cup quarterfinals onwards haven't been played. I think we'd be in the semi-final stage at this point had they been played up to this point. So they've lost revenue on those big showpiece one-off games. They've lost TV revenue, all sorts. The other issues are that, unfortunately, because of lack of games, the satellite broadcasts, which are mostly subscription based, are not making any money either. And they're putting pressure on the FA to do something. Alexander Serafin has stated that there are three options on the table for restarting the season. Sometime at the end of May, first 2 weeks in June, or by the 30th of June. If they do not restart by the 30th of June, then we get into territory which we don't know. They're not workmates, they're trolls. We move on. I know what who my workmates are, who support the channel. We just move on from that. There's just every so often we get the morons who constantly try and trash live streams. What they are actually doing is increasing view counts and hits on the channel. So actually, they're actually helping me, but they're just annoying. On a serious side, though, the Premier League, they've had talks over pay deferrals, and it looks likely that by the end of the day, there will be a 30% pay cut in place for Premier League players. 30%. I think it's too little, too late, and not enough. Other sports, not just in this country but around the world, are cutting far more of their salaries to allow non-playing staff who are either involved with the organisations, teams, and then the stadiums can continue to get paid. That's the problem that a lot of people are facing, is they're being furloughed. And we now know more about the Tottenham situation. It doesn't look as good. They've really made a PR disaster out of that. But Newcastle United as well, they led the way in furloughing staff first, unpaid. So there's a whole load of things going on. And the money side of things, this could be where the money bubble bursts. I don't see how clubs can justify the wages they pay players. I don't see how the players can justify pay rises. And I always use Danny Rose as an example because he says 50 grand a week is not enough for me. I want 100. There is no way a player like that can now demand that in the current climate. Richard Branson, well, I try and keep politics off this channel and put it on the other channel, but Richard Branson has been involved in sport. And we'll get onto the NRL later. But Richard Branson has been involved in motorsport. He's been involved in a variety of sports sponsorship. He was interested in taking over the sponsorship of Newcastle United when Northern Rock went bust. He did for a brief period with Virgin Money. He's obviously had the Virgin F1 team. That didn't go so well, did it? He sponsored the Brawn F1 team, their championship year. So Branson's been involved in sports sponsorship before. My views on him, much like the views I have on Mike Ashley and Tim Martin and Weatherspoons. Unfortunately, over the years, I have used their companies to buy products and services. I used to go into Virgin Megastores when they were open, but Richard Branson used to be a role model for entrepreneurship. So if you wanted to start a business, didn't do so well at school, but you had a drive to create something. Richard Branson was always taught to us in business studies, and it was seen as a role model for aspiring entrepreneurs who wanted to set up businesses, and he was seen as a role model because he didn't do well at school. The last couple of years, you can forget about that. He's asking for a bailout on his companies, yet he could dip into his pocket and pay the staff for 3 to 6 months. He's not going to lose that much money, and he can defer that against tax. No, he's decided not to do that. He's crying for a bailout from the government. Also, he sued the NHS and the government successfully for money on a contract as well, which I found was pretty disgusting. I've got friends who work for the Virgin Group who have been furloughed at this time and are uncertain about their job prospects going forward. I've got friends who work for Virgin Atlantic, the airline. I've got friends who work for the Virgin gyms and things like that, which are under a different name, but they're owned by the Virgin Group. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Richard Branson, but I try and keep the political and social thoughts more away from the sports channel and on the history channel that I have. But I haven't really posted on there for a while, but I've got to do some video game reviews because I've got into Modern Warfare more now. I've obviously got to review Gears 5 and Red Dead 2 and all that, and I've got some video game reviews and film reviews to do. On the NRL point of things, I can't see them coming back by June the 1st. I think that's too soon. July, August, more likely. That's a more likely outcome. If you're considering a return to action, considering I don't know how it works in Australia with the lockdown because you've got states and territories and they all have their own parliaments and their own rules and regulations, similar to the UK where we have 4 parliaments, I suppose. But in a sense, each state controls its territory, controls its borders and who can enter and not enter. The plan by the NRL was to play in South Central Queensland and have all the teams in lockdown. It gets a bit difficult with the Warriors and some of the like Melbourne and Canberra, those teams that are further away from Sydney and Brisbane. But that was their plan, was to play in like isolation in a bubble behind closed doors. I can't see that happening at this time. I think because Australia's not in flu season, Australia's in the end of summer, beginning of autumn. Their flu season hasn't started in the southern hemisphere yet, so I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But they have been more proactive on measures taken to slow the spread. There's talk over here that in the northern hemisphere we might peak around Easter, which is a week or so's time. Again, I can't see any sport restarting until at least July. Bearing in mind Wimbledon's just been cancelled. There's the Major League Baseball have cancelled their London series, which I'll do a video on later today. They've cancelled their London series at the London City Stadium. Plus, West Ham would have preferential treatment if they are going to try and complete the Premier League season. So there's a lot going on. I can't see the NRL getting back to action that early. I can see a reduced schedule. They have been told they can play as late as December, have a shortened pre-season for next season, and then roll straight into the 2021 season. But I can't see the NRL getting back that soon. They're going to have to try and squeeze in State of Origin, which they've already stated will take place after the season has finished. But the NRL is in a financial, bit of a on the edge financially. They have secured a deal for now with Volandis and the Australian Rugby League Commission, finding funds just to tie teams over for now. But we're going to see a different NRL next season. We're going to see a different, sporting landscape from next year. Sports have to look at themselves and how they're run, where the finances come from, how they make their money, the TV deals or media rights deals they have in place. It's not just TV, but online streaming, websites, a variety of things. And I love it when people just walk in, don't even knock on the door, and just stand there. It's a pain in the arse. Family are a pain in the arse. Actually, hang on a second. My mail has just turned up. Let's see if my DVD has turned up. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, even though I'm trying to avoid spending too much on Amazon, I thought as I've got a film collection, I might add to it. So I decided to buy Cutthroat Island, the bad version of Pirates of the Caribbean. It was made by the same people who made the Terminator series originally. And it's not the best. It's Gina Davis, so her smile, it's just the teeth, so much teeth, very square jaw. But I actually enjoyed the film. I think it got a bad set of reviews, but when it came out, it broke the studio that made the film. On the side of losing money, yes, because the TV deals and contracts and sponsorship deals in place for a variety of sports and sporting tournaments and events, such as the Olympics and the Euros and the World Championship of Ice Hockey. I'm talking about these things that happen on a cycle. They're not like sports teams, like leagues. They're international events. You've got the event organisers, the event sponsors, which vary from year to year because they're hosted internationally. And then on the Euro side of things, this is where having a tournament over a whole continent was a suicidal idea by UEFA. They realised that pretty quickly, but they'd already made arrangements for in lots of cities to host it, as it was the anniversary, like the 60th anniversary since the first tournament. It was meant to be a showpiece event. It's been pushed back a year. I actually think, ironically, we could see some of the best football at tournament level we have ever seen next summer, because I can see next season being truncated, that means shortened, and I can see this season not restarting as early as they want. I don't think the transfer record ever gets broken ever again. I think there's been a turning point now. I don't think fans would tolerate the amount of money that football's been throwing around for the last 25 years carrying on. I just don't think it's tolerated. I don't know how football managed to cut through the last decade or so and make so much money, yet the money not reach the lower levels of the game, and the lower levels of the game across Europe being in financial meltdown. And yet no one seems to really want to care about the lower levels of the game. If the season gets voided, Liverpool and Manchester United and Man City and all those clubs win nothing. Man City would lose their League Cup title, for example. Liverpool win the Premier League. So if they void the season, as we found out with the non-league football below the National League, you don't win anything. No promotion, no relegation, everything expunged. So it seems to be one rule for the lower levels of the football pyramid and a different rule for the higher levels. Whereas what we've seen in other sports is they're honouring the results up to that point and they're hoping to restart seasons. Or if they've decided to end the season, that's the season done. This is awarded. We'll move on. Unfortunately, the amount of money in football, it surprises me that that's been tolerated for the last 12 years with the economics that we've seen. Just nothing like this, where we don't know if the season's going to restart or if there's a player strike. Now, if there was a player strike or some form of labour unrest, as we've seen with the NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and etc. in North America, it's a different system, mind. They will still complete a percentage of the season. Now, we are 75% complete, which means technically they can award the title. I can't see them voiding it. There's too much money involved, and the PR disaster that would be, because it's nice to see a new name on the Premier League trophy, even though it's a very successful club historically. And this generation hasn't seen Liverpool this good. It's a strange one. We're in a strange time. Football actually, ironically, has the most to lose out of all the professional sports around the world. This could be the kick in the backside football needs to reform itself. The amount of money, as I say, sloshing around, the amount of corruption allegations, the amount of match fixing allegations, clubs still going bust. The money isn't trickling down. Fans aren't feeling like they're getting a good deal out of the subscription TV and streaming packages that are available. BT and Sky are now demanding yet more games come to them to avoid them complaining and going further with the legal side of things, saying, well, we're not getting our bargain out of the TV deal. So the money men really are greedy. The players are greedy. I don't think the players can justify demanding pay rises and massive contracts anymore. I can't see that happening. When you say Americans, are you talking about North Americans or South Americans? Because I don't think Americans really know what socialism is either, or capitalism. I don't think Americans know what a political system is anymore. They voted in Trump. So putting that one out there. And then if you're in Toronto, they voted in Bob Ford as mayor multiple times, and he was a known crackhead. So North Americans aren't the smartest bunch in the world, generically speaking. The issue with what the North American sport see, they don't have promotion relegation. They have a franchise system, which means the league owns the team and then someone franchises it out. So the owner is the money man pumping money into that particular franchise. It isn't a socialist sport. Not really. It's the most capitalist sport you will find. It might have working class origins alongside a lot of other sports, but in reality, the social origins of the sport, the fan base, it's not the same. Same with rugby league. Same with ice hockey. Ironically, I would call a socialist sport because it started in communities playing on frozen ponds, because that's the only thing they could do to keep fit and active during the height of Canadian winter when it's like -50. It's just funny because the Americans are stupid and gullible into believing whatever the media tells them. American sport is interesting in itself. I think American sport is far more socialist in how it's organised and run than European sport with a club system and promotion relegation. Ironically, while the sports in Europe are very working class in origin, they're very capitalist in operation, whereas in America they're very capitalist in origin in the sense that a rich guy wants to make some money and doesn't want to pay his players a lot, but they're very socialist in operation. It's really weird. The ultimate capitalist society has the most socialist leagues, but they don't want to see it like that. But it is funny. What sport will turn first? I think the most likely sport to be unaffected or affected little would be the winter sports like ice hockey and rugby union. I would have thought the rugby both codes of rugby would be most likely to return first, alongside motorsport as well, possibly, because you can do rallying and motocross in bad weather. So I would say ice hockey, out of the sports that I follow religiously, would be probably the first to return in Europe, at least. Their seasons generally start September, October. And I wouldn't say indoor athletics. There's still a debate over athletics and with the Olympics and how they changed the Olympics. There's a lot of Olympic events that still need to be qualified for. So not all the participants have been sorted. Indoor athletics, I'm not sure, because the IAAF were very, very poor, shall I say, pressurising the IOC to cancel the Olympics. They had a big opportunity to really get the IOC on board sooner, and they are in charge of all athletics, track and field, indoor and outdoor. So there's a lot of pressure on Lord Co, Seb Co, to explain why they took so long to, uh, you know, push the IOC in the right direction. But there's a lot of events that have been cancelled. They're still trying to get the Diamond League anniversary games in London going in August. I can't see that happening somehow. But I think for me, I think the winter sports are most likely to be least affected. Um, Most likely because their seasons are pretty much done with the weather as it is. And most of their events take place between November and March. So they're, I think, ones least likely to be affected and could possibly have a pretty standard schedule, if not slightly shortened. That's why I think ice hockey won't be too badly affected. They can shorten the season, which will affect them financially a little bit, but I think they can get some kind of play done. Motorsport, F1's in a bit of a pickle, I think, but I would say, yeah, ideal. You could say ping pong. Yes and no. You still, you know, these indoor events, they're in very tight, confined arenas. A lot of them, like snooker, darts, ping pong, table tennis, as you want to call it, badminton, squash, those kind of things. If the more major ones like badminton and squash and tennis that you can play indoors aren't taking place, um, I can't see some of the more niche ones like table tennis, even though China is starting to get back normal. There's a lot of players on the Chinese circuit. In Europe, at least, I can't see any of those events taking place while this lockdown's on. The 100 ball cricket happening? Nah, it's not going to happen. ECB are shitting themselves now. They put so much capital into it, and it's not going to take place. The fact that it was a flawed concept anyway, and they're still trying to push it, they risk losing millions. But the ECB's been badly run for a long time, and there could be change at the top very, very soon. They've really tried to push a format that no one really wants apart from the ECB. And yeah, the BBC picks up some games. I don't think anyone's going to really want to watch it because it's not what the mainstream cricket fan wants, which they're risking losing. In average terms, in mean terms, even though cricket viewership was up for the first time in 15 years, since 2005, last summer with the World Cup and the Test series that we had, they were still well below the 2005 peak of 25 million. At 50, there were 10 million viewer average down. So they've already in 15 years they've lost a huge chunk of casual and hardcore fans from cricket. They're desperately trying to popularise the sport again, and fans have said just put domestic T20, one day, Test cricket, county cricket on free to air TV. That's all we want. Now I'll give you the 100. We don't want that. You get some TV. We don't want that. So the ECB haven't even really listened to their fan base, and the ECB is looking at losing a lot of money. Dodgeball would be funny, but again, it's a team sport. Lots of people can be in less than 2 feet of each other. It's not going to happen. All sports on lockdown. Although it is funny, they should televise something like that, or ultimate frisbee, which is maybe quite fun. At the moment, we're just in a weird period of nothing. They're just getting old sports documentaries and sports matches out of the archives and sporting events out of the archives and just doing reruns of stuff that we saw in the last 20 years that we went, what sucks then sucks now. But a lot of the broadcasters are losing money. They're putting pressure on the various sports leagues and organisations to get resumed. But we have to follow government advice. Come on. I think sport's starting to go back into this bubble where it's not in reality, especially football. On a unrelated, well, semi-related sport now, Billy Joe Saunders, the boxer, with his advice how to beat up your wife. Yeah, I hope he gets a lengthier ban than what he's got. It's his comments and his social media feed. What a tit! There's already concerns that domestic violence, men against women, women against men, adults against kids, that kind of thing is going to be on the rise with people being frustrated, not being able to work, drinking a lot at home, confined on top of each other. He comes out and does that and has his license suspended. I hope he never boxes again. Of course he will, because it's boxing, because boxing's a sport full of domestic violence and assault apologists, because it's boxing. And it seems that the governing body's brain dead, let alone the people who participate in the sport. Dana White, he wants to have the next UFC event later in April to go ahead. They haven't got a venue. Their headliner Habib is in lockdown. Yeah, Dana White still wants the next UFC event to go ahead. He's in La La Land. Gordon Taylor in charge of the PFA. This is another one. Before we'll go on to how much I think Sky Sports will lose. But they're already a bit under criticism for the survey they sent about how sexy our female reporters are. They're on the back foot on that point. On the fantasy side of things, we're having the virtual Grand National run, which, in my mind, is just the biggest waste of time ever thought of. But I've lost my train of thought. Gordon Taylor, who's the chair of the PFA, he's the head of the Footballers Union. There are growing calls for him to stand down. He was already going to go at some point this season. The advice the PFA were giving the players this week over the last couple of days is completely at odds with what every other sport company is trying to do and society. They were telling the players not to take pay cuts. Birmingham City said, "Nah, to hell with that, we're going to do it." And fair play to Birmingham City for going against what the PFA were telling players. And all those players, even those who earn less than £6,000 a week, so those on the real low footballing wages in real terms, going, to hell with the PFA. We need to make sure all our non-playing staff keep a job. That's the groundsman, the tea lady in the cafeteria, the training staff, the ticketing staff who work at the ticket office, the club shop staff. They were like, to hell with what the PFA are saying. We're gonna look after all our work colleagues by deferring half our wages. And fair play to them. On the Sky Sports thing, how much money will they lose? I think BT Sport is more at risk of losing money. Sky still has Sky TV packages, so they can pump money in from one part of the business into the other, but they are going to lose a lot of money. People are just cancelling their subscriptions en masse, saying, well, I've paid for a service I'm not getting. Not even match replays of stuff I'm going to cancel. Free Sports and Premier Sports have picked up the Chinese Super League because that gets back underway soon. So Chinese football will be on subscription and free-to-air TV in the coming weeks. So Free Sports have seen a little gap in the market and they picked up the Chinese Super League rights. Bearing in mind the Chinese Super League is a fixed league anyway, so the results we know a week in advance. You just go on the internet and find a betting syndicate. You could be told the results before the matches even take place. His next season's results in full. That is not a joke, that is serious. The Chinese Super League is known for being fixed, yet players are going over there on big money like Oscar and Drogba went over there, and a whole host of other ex-Premier League and European superstar players have gone over there to play out their football. So that's going to be interesting. They're doing virtual. New Dark on the run back to how he just murdered his family by flaming his car. Oh, I don't bother with Netflix. That Tiger King documentary. Oh God. How's that? That's now become a meme. And she did kill her husband, by the way. Carol Baskin killed her husband. That's what everyone's saying. Tigers do get a bit bitey when they're hungry. I'm not a big fan on Netflix and these HBO, these off the wall documentaries. Look at what happened to Sunderland Day. Doing it a one-off on the odd team here, yeah, it's fine. But when it becomes a recurring thing, when they go season 2 of this team's tyre fire, well, you might as well just go, let's find a team that's really bad and just show how bad it can be behind. Oh, there's the Ottawa Senators. They're a really bad team. Or there's the Detroit Red Wings. They're a tyre fire. Let's film how bad that dressing room is when they lose 6-0 again. It's just, no. I can't stand Netflix because if it's on Netflix, it's no good in my view. You look at the film lists on Netflix. If a film is not on there, it's probably a good film. Ryan back said, no, I didn't. I didn't talk about it when it happened. I'm not going to talk about it now. It's a thing, isn't it? I think I've got to double check what he actually did, hasn't he? Ryan back. So let's have a little look, see what shitty thing he did, because bound to be stuff. Oh God, it's aha, there we go. Wow. Wow, oh God. Set on fire. Wow. Yeah. It didn't really make the news much back when it all happened, to be honest. I didn't even know, like, here he was. wasn't that great a rugby player, but apparently uh, he was a bit of a twisted guy. But I tend to avoid things like that. Oh, it is insane. I mean, I barely knew it happened, but at the time I was still living in my old flat. Which we've seen some videos in the flat, and well, he's dead now, so we can't really prove that. Apparently, he was showing pretty disturbing signs when he was a youngster as well, before he really got into rugby, according to some of the media reports I've just flicked through. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was CTE or some kind of brain-related injury that led to a behavioural change. We've seen that with a whole host of sports stars who compete in quite physical sports where there's contact. We've seen. I've listed off a whole load of ice hockey and rugby league and rugby union and NFL and CFL players who've just shown signs of behavioural changes after having multiple concussions and head injuries, and other injuries as well. Because you could be getting really depressed if your knee keeps blowing out. You dislocate your shoulder, you can't play for a few months. Repetitive surgeries take it out of the body as well. It's not just head injuries; it's the whole thing. I think there's a link between pain, depression, and frustration and all that. But I don't think it made massive news at the time, though. A couple of months ago, it really didn't. We're going only a month and a half ago. It didn't make massive headlines. Of course, I think the coronavirus has sort of buried a lot of news that could be reported on. And he wasn't even that. He was a. I wouldn't say he's a gentleman. Well, it would make news on social media, but even then, I didn't see much. I knew he'd retired some time ago. That was about it. He didn't really have an outstanding career. I wouldn't thought he had a pretty solid professional career, but nothing outstanding. No major honours that I can think of. He was just one of those players that, unless you support the clubs he played for, you wouldn't even know who he was. But if we want to discuss CTE and the impact that's having out on a variety of sports, I think the solution there is better medical care. Again, we're going by hearsay because all we know is car fire. So to say he definitely, those seatbelts do melt after a while. Again, we can go back to the social media and how they reported it and jump to conclusions. We're seeing a lot of this now. If this happened 10, 15 years ago, social media wasn't really a thing, and it would have probably got more mainstream press attention as well. What we're seeing right now with what's going on in the world, we're in a very strange time. There is no sport on the TV, none. So the sports news reporters must be like really, really bored because all they're reporting on is yet another sporting event getting postponed and moved. The CTE argument with behavioural changes and suicides and depression and aggressive behaviour, it's a known correlation, but also steroids as well. And a lot of rugby players got away with using steroids. We know there's a steroids issue in rugby, both codes. But again, social media, the trial by social media, as I call it, the whole Caroline Flack thing. Well, I didn't like her personally, having, that whole thing, the Caroline Flack thing. And yeah, she was charged with an offence. Then the media and social media went into a frenzy. The media then were given reporting restrictions because there was a criminal offence ongoing and a trial. Social media just went bananas, took her own life. The fact that she wasn't a particularly nice person is irrelevant. Suddenly people are going, oh, she was such a lovely person. No, she wasn't. She was a vile human being, but that's another thing entirely. But she was hounded to death, lost her job. Whether she should have had the job in the first place is another thing. Rugby player, I mean, CTE, I get it's an ongoing science with injuries, but if you constantly injure the same part of your body, it doesn't matter if it's your head, your shoulder, that part of your body gets weaker. and don't allow it to recover, it can't heal properly. So it is like constantly dislocating your shoulder. There will become a point where you'll need reconstructive surgery and you'll never be able to play again. Doesn't matter what sport you play. Repetitive injuries on the same location, same part of the body, will result in that part of the body becoming weaker, more prone to aches and pains, more prone to breaking down and requiring rehabilitation. Same with the head. It doesn't take a genius to work out if you constantly bang your head, it's not good for you. But I think part of the problem with rugby, and if we can talk about this, and it's not, yes, because the NFL players think they're indestructible because they're all roided up to their eyeballs and think the padding makes them invincible. It really doesn't. You hear the collisions with that. It's metal on metal. It's not a pleasant sound. It sounds pretty nasty, to be honest. On the rugby side of things, it's tackle technique. It is tackle technique. A lot of the time, you look at Lee Halfpenny, he can't tackle properly. It's not because he's a smaller player. Actually, he should be pretty good at tackling because of his low centre of gravity. No, he gets his head in the wrong position constantly and leads with his head. I have no sympathy when he gets concussed, not because it's his career ending. He has a shocking tackle technique that kids look at and will try and copy. George North regularly gets concussed, yet somehow he's playing a couple of weeks later when he clearly shouldn't. How long can he go before he's done? I look at most of the concussions you get in rugby, and it's poor tackle technique by the tackling player, either causing the concussion on the opposition player or on himself. It's not in a ruck or in a maul or in a scrum. It's in the tackle area with poor tackling technique, and it's getting worse. And the technique's getting worse. It's not because the players necessarily getting bigger and the collisions are getting more powerful. It's technique. You can be a smaller man and take down a bigger man without ripping your own head off or theirs. The seatbelt tackle, I think, is a legitimate tackle. I don't think there's nothing too wrong with that. I think they've got OTT on that side of the safety. Get the players not to put their head in the wrong place, and there'll be less concussions. You won't completely get rid of concussions from rugby league or union. The tackle technique is shocking by the professionals. You're taught as a kid how to tackle safely and properly, and for some reason, they hit 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and they can't tackle at all. And some of the attempts at tackling are an NFL player wouldn't do that with all the gear on. So what else can you say, really, is I look at players who regularly get concussed and I look at their tackle technique, and a lot of them don't have any. Simple answer. Oh, God. I like my lungs. No, I look at players who regularly get concussed and I look at their tackling technique. A lot of the time, excuse me, it's non-existent tackling technique. They get their head in the wrong place, shoulder in the wrong place. They're too upright. They're going in the wrong part of the body, like the knee or the elbow, hip area, rather than going for the meaty stomach. And their tackle technique concusses them. Or if they get their position wrong, the unfortunate thing is, their shoulder goes through the other guy's head and he's on the floor. So tackle technique is the thing that I look for when a player gets concussed. And it's the same in NFL, CFL, so American football, Canadian football, National League, National Football League. Oh, yeah, but then they won't learn the technique how to head a ball safely. So it's a catch-22. They're going OTT on the health and safety now to the point where we might as well go, all right, this is an army training exercise. In real life, we'd be shot at. In this, we've got safety mats and harnesses and all this. In a battle situation, you're not going to have safety mats and a harness. It's like, how do they expect these kids to learn the technique properly and safely? They won't. They're more likely to injure themselves later on. So well done, schools. Well done for the OTT PC brigade winning again. The majority of kids don't go on to play professional football, and those that do are generally the thick ones anyway. And that's my general opinion. Most of those who go on into professional sports are actually not that smart, because they're crap at the other bits of school. It's the only thing they're good at. you're going to make it more likely they're going to get injured because they're not going to learn the proper techniques of how to head and chest a ball. They're trying to take tackling out the game because reasons. It's going to be a lost art form, and then you're more likely to both go for a header, let's say, to opposition players, and they're going to knock each other out because they don't know how to read the ball's flight and all that. Oh no, let's make it more dangerous for when they're older, when they're bigger, and when you've got two 14-stone, centre back and a centre forward going to head the ball, they leave their forearm and smash each other in the head, and they're both concussed on the floor. It's ludicrous. It is ludicrous. The PC softy brigade. Let's wrap them in cotton wool, so when they cut their knee, they scream their head off. Oh my god! Honestly, I fell out of a tree when I was younger. I'm perfectly fine. Do I have any sports films? Do I have any sports films? Oh god, this is not safe on this chair. I do somewhere. Where is Goon? I have. Yes, there we go. We've got Goon. We have Goon. We have Goon. What else do we have? I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of sports films, to be massively brutally honest. I'm not gonna lie on that one, but I do have Goon. What else do I have? I've got to have a look now. Oh god. Oh. I do have Days of Thunder somewhere in all this. That's NASCAR, but I'll find it. US Marshals. Oh god. Oh, this thing is that. You make me look for films now, and I can't find them. And that's really going to be annoying. But I do have. Oh god. I can't find all my films. It's all over. I do have other sports films, but I'm not a big fan of sports films really. Goon is a hockey film. It's a very good hockey film. I'm not overly a big fan of sports films in the main. I think, well, yes, it's about the '95 South Africa Rugby World Cup win. Yeah, they're pretty good. But in the main, I'm not overly keen on them, really. I never really got into them. Could you say Space Jam's a sports film, or does it have Michael Jordan in it and it's just some cartoon characters playing basketball? But yes, I have Goon. I've got a few others floating around somewhere, but I can't find them, which is really annoying. Really, really annoying. That is not funny. I've got. Oh, what else? I could say Point Break's got a bit of sport in it because it's got surfing in it, and that's kind of cool. But in reality, that's more of a crime film stuff. God, I generally have to organise all this stuff because moving all the stuff around is really paying me off. I would say yes. I'm not a big fan of sports films. Sports documentaries is a different thing. If that's a documentary about a particular time in sports history, a particular time in that person's career, the career of, let's say, a sports star. I watched the one on Bob Probert. I've watched the one 6 hours long, mind, but I sat through that and nearly lost my mind. I've watched the documentary from the Broad Street Bullies, which is the Flyers. I've watched a documentary on all 31 NHL teams, so I've watched a fair few. I've watched a couple of documentaries on State of Origin and Rugby League and bits and pieces like that. I don't mind the sports documentaries. And before the 2006 World Cup, there was a series of documentaries that were hour-long episodes to do with every World Cup up to 2006. And that was really interesting because it covered the pre-war World Cups in 1930, 34 and 38, and then the World Cups from 1950 onwards. And it was really, really interesting when they got to the Argentina in 1978, that World Cup. And that took place at a time of heightened political tension in South America and of course, backdrop of the Falklands in the 82 World Cup as well. So there, I prefer historical sports documentaries. They're quite interesting. I've seen documentaries on Muhammad Ali and a whole host of other sporting figures. I've seen documentaries to do with the Rio World Cup in 2014. It was the build up to the World Cup and then the social aspects of it. So, yeah, I prefer the documentaries over the actual films. But that was an interesting question. We haven't really even got into, you know, ex sports stars becoming actors. You could say Vinnie Jones. There you go. OJ Simpson, even though now he's a convicted felon, but OJ Simpson was once an NFL running back. Yeah, you've got Vinnie Jones getting into acting. Eric Cantona, Frank Leboeuf, former French internationals, they've got into acting. It's interesting to see what sports stars do after they retire from the sport, and some of them have made very, very good careers in things you wouldn't even realise they could be good at. We've seen a whole host of football players get involved in acting. OJ Simpson is just weird. He's really strange. He was great. He had a great acting career. There's no doubt on that. It's obviously all got a bit weird after his ex-wife died, and it is a bit strange. The turn of events since the mid-90s till now, the last 26 years of his life have been particularly bizarre, and he has spent a fair period of time in prison for armed robbery. OJ Simpson is an interesting character. I could do a video on OJ Simpson, but it would be very interesting to see the response to that. I might have to get the old whiteboard out and the old pens out and do a video on the juice. Brilliant NFL player, had a brilliant career there, played in some Super Bowls. Really, funny as an actor, playing the slapstick comedy in the Naked Gun series and other films. He made a lot of money acting. And then it all gets a bit weird after that. His ex-wife and her friend die. He drives a Ford Bronco 1984 pickup 4x4 for 18 hours, something around LA on the interstate, because it ran out of petrol. The trial, I remember watching that. And then, we are where we are now, where he's been in prison for the best part of a decade for armed robbery. And now he seems to become a star on Twitter and it's causing controversy online. He is quite funny. On David Beckham, should he gone into Hollywood? No, I don't think David Beckham's an actor as such, but he's been very, very good promoting his brand. He's brand Beckham. He's been very, very good at launching his own cosmetics range and perfumes and colognes, which are actually quite good. Clothing ranges. He's done a whole variety of business dealings that have made him a lot of money, and now he owns his own football team. So he's done reasonably well out of his post-playing career. He had a lot of modelling contracts and various other bits and pieces. So he's made his money. He is, I think, possibly the most marketed British sports star ever. Although you could say Johnny Wilkinson at his peak was also quite well branded as well. Didn't make as much money, but it was quite a sellable product, the Wilkinson product. You could argue there have been a fair few individual athletes, various sports, who've been quite well sold as global brands, and they've made a bit of dollar. Wayne Rooney, ironically. He is a figure of derision for many, but he's made money. Tyson Fury, I think, is now facing, allegations that they falsified evidence when it came to his suspension 2 years from boxing. So his career is on the line again because of allegations about falsifying evidence in relation to his steroids ban. So Tyson Fury could have screwed himself a little bit. But you could say Lennox Lewis was quite sellable. Chris Eubank. There's been quite a few boxers over, mostly in the 80s and 90s, that were quite marketable. Prince Nassim was a bit of a pain in the arse, but he appeared in lots of advertising and he was well marketed as well. I think now I can see a lot of these athletes being pretty bland individuals. Lewis Hamilton, I'm not a fan of Hamilton, not because people say, if you're not a fan of Hamilton, you must be racist. No, I'm not a fan of Hamilton because he's a dickhead. There's a difference. Um, Complete irrelevance to the colour of one's skin. If they're a knob, they're a knob. But you could say Lewis Hamilton, Brian Hamilton. He comes across as fake in his personality, whereas someone like Jenson Button comes across as quite genuine. And I've had criticism labelled at me, oh, because Lewis Hamilton's not white and you don't like him, you must be a racist. No, I don't like him because he's a knobhead. The colour of one's skin has got nothing to do with the colour of one's personality. End of story. That's my viewpoint on that. Tyson Fury, I think he's a knob. Personally, great boxer, absolute bellend. But at the same time, he has battled quite publicly with issues with addiction and mental health issues. I'll give him kudos for that. I still think he's a dickhead. That's my personal opinion. I'm not going to change that. Yeah, if I said that to his face, he would probably knock me the fuck out. But at the end of the day, it's not what you do in your sport, it's what you do away from your sport that has a big bearing on how I view an athlete or a sports star. Second most marketed, you could say Ricky Hatton in the past. He was when he was on the top of his game. He was quite well marketed as a sports star and as a brand. And he's put a lot of his money into boxing gyms and other forms of community in Manchester. He's put a lot of his money into not just boxing gyms, but community projects around the Manchester area. Doesn't get enough credit for doing that. You could say Audley Harrison. He's done a fair bit post boxing. You could say Frank Bruno at his prime. He's ventured into TV presenting and bits and pieces. He's obviously had his health issues as well. Quite a few boxes that were well pushed by promoters for advertising and such. You could say it's a difficult one because there was a period of time where David Beckham was everywhere, but a lot of his teammates were also quite well pushed for the advertising as well. But you look what some ex-players are now doing when it comes to football, running hotels, horse race training like Michael Owen. He's a bit of a damp squib when it comes to personal. Peter Crouch has done quite well for himself as a journalist. You could say Freddie Flintoff has carved out a career where he's made quite a bit of money. Flintoff, I think, could be up there as one of the most sellable sports stars. He's made a decent career in the media, and having met him, he is quite funny. But I think he might be doing a bit too much, and he's had a bit of a controversial tale of things. You could say Matt Dawson on the TV as well. Sue Barker, host of Question Sport, she makes a fair bit of money in TV presenting. There's quite a few of them that have done quite well post playing days or post sports days and gone on to make a fair career in whatever they do. You would say Beckham is the most promoted, but then there are quite a few others as well who made a bit of money out of sponsorship deals and business dealings. Gary Lineker, I think he's done quite well for himself. Don't necessarily agree with all his political views all the time, but as a media journalist, he's done quite well as a journalist. He's carved out a quite good journalistic career. I wouldn't say he's the best sports presenter out there or the best pundit, but he's done quite well. Alan Shearer as well, his former England teammates, done quite well. They both carved a decent career out of their post-playing days. Whether you agree with their opinions on football or not is moot point. But they have done pretty well for them. I wouldn't say he's bland. I'd just say he comes across as that with his accent, which I don't mind a Geordie accent, but he does come across as quite plain. But at the same time, I think he does have a bit of a sense of humour, and having met him, I think he is quite funny. But you could say he's not the most interesting person to have a conversation with, in the sense that it's his tone of voice. It seems quite monotone, but he knows his stuff, and that's the important thing. you can take out of it. You can be really extrovert and loud and lots of hand movements and shouty and know nothing, or be quite, you know, consistent, flowing, not outstanding, and know a lot. He does know a lot about what he's talking about. And there's a reason why he's the record goal scorer in English Premier League football. Um, he's quite good at what he did, and he's still pretty decent as an expert on breaking down and analysing sports plays. I think he's more intelligent than your average football player. But yeah, his personality, he's not the most exciting personality. That doesn't make him boring, I don't think. What you see on the TV may be completely different to what you get when the cameras are off and it's behind the scenes and they might be joking around, playing pranks on the cast and crew. But he has his presenting style. That's how he feels comfortable talking in front of a camera and discussing things with. Bearing in mind that when they're on set, they have an earpiece in. So there's someone talking in their ear. They've also got to talk to their colleague. They've got to look at their notes and they've got someone in their ear as well. So he's probably worked out a way where he's a little bit boring, but he's doing multiple things. If someone knew nothing about football and watched it, they'd literally fall asleep. That's your opinion. I think you have to bear in mind they have got an earpiece in. They have got a few notes that they've taken from the match they're watching. Let's say it's a live broadcast and it's half time and they're trying to view from their little box, which is normally in the corner of the pitch, not side on. They've got to take notes from that. And they've got this earpiece. And sometimes you can see where it's not working and they're trying to ad lib it. I think he's been doing it now for 20 odd years. He's quite good at doing what he does. Could he be a little bit more exciting in his tone of voice? Probably. But is he comfortable doing what he's doing as he does it? Yes. Would he put some bells and whistles on there? Would he make it better? I don't know. I respect his viewpoint on the sport that he was very, very good at. You could say some of the rugby commentators are absolutely shocking. And Paul O'Connell, great rugby player, can barely understand what he's saying with his thick Irish accent. Yet, when you can decipher what he's saying, it's pretty. Ian Wright's very excitable. He is very knowledgeable on the sport. He is also a great player at his peak of his powers. He's a great player, but he comes across as more of the fan rather than the expert. Even though when he's talking, he's making a lot of sense if you can understand his South London accent. Ian Wright is a very passionate, colourful figure compared to Alan Shearer, who's very calm and methodical. Yeah, at their, I wouldn't say Jermaine Genius is meh. I think he's also very knowledgeable. He was a very good player. Unfortunately, injury curtailed his career, which is a shame because he was a very talented midfielder. And unfortunately did retire a lot younger than Shearer and Wright. But again, he has one of those, I think it's Staffordshire he's from. He's not the most exciting and extrovert character, but I do think he's very, very knowledgeable about what he's talking about. And he has also done stuff outside of football when it comes to the media as well. But again, you have to remember that it's not just me like this talking in front of a camera. There's earpieces, you've got the director, you've got the producer. If they're producing a live broadcast, something could happen where there's an event going on and that's in the earpiece. You now got to talk about this, and they haven't prepared for it. So, while he does come across as a little bit stale in the sense that he's not very excitable, you have to think off camera. He has to have a hidden personality. I think his on-screen personality. That's what he's comfortable when they're discussing what's happening in the game or the series of games or that moment in sport. But I think off camera, I think he's a little bit more like Ian Wright than people realise. But as a player, he was very, very good. But some people are quite, in public, when they're not with, let's say, friends or family, they are a bit different to when they're at home with people they've grown up with. When you're in front of the camera, you can't make any mistakes, and that you have to, do a certain thing a certain way. A lot of it's scripted. Yeah, but they're all people that no one likes. Yes, they have full of personality. They're all massive knobheads. Carragher likes spitting at kids. Neville just winds up anyone from not Manchester. Souness was a thug on and off the field, and Roy Keane is just an arsehole. They've got four dickheads at Sky and paid them double what BBC pay Genius, Shearer and Lineker. Souness, Blackburn manager, wins us the League Cup. Also nearly got us relegated twice. Can't stand him. Neville, I don't know how he and Carragher don't come to punch-ups. Carragher, how he didn't lose his job for spitting at yeah, the father might have given a bit of road rage and given him a finger, but he decided to. Oh God, I don't think any of them like each other. I think that's probably why it works. But at the same time, they're all massive knobheads, really. Um, Neville, I think, has redeemed himself a little bit with the fact he is opening up his hotels to NHS staff at this time, and he's giving away things for free to them and making sure they are looked after at his chain of hotels with his ex teammates. Keane, Roy Keane is a spiky personality anyway. He's always had that fight in him. And bearing in mind when Roy Keane was growing up, the troubles in Ireland and Northern Ireland were a big thing. Souness, I've never liked Souness. A lot of people don't like Souness. And Carragher, Souness is, yeah, Souness comes across as very bitter and quite a nasty individual. Carragher doesn't come across as not a nice bloke either, but you have to remember that the areas where they grew up, where they came from, the social issues of the areas they came from, they're all working class lads, some quite rough areas of the country where they grew up. So they've done pretty well to get where they are, but they're not nice people in the way they got there. I would much rather sit down with Phil Neville than Gary Neville and talk about football, even though Phil Neville comes across as a little bit bland and stale when it comes to his personality. He seems more likable than Gary Neville. Gary Neville seems to be a bit of a dick. But he has redeemed himself with the fact he has opened up his hotel chain to the NHS during this time. And he has taken a dig at Mike Ashley, who he always has a dig at. So I'll give Neville kudos for that. But the four of them, they just come across as four really disgruntled middle-aged men who their working career of what their chosen profession, their first choice profession is over, and they're embittered and they're nasty and they're spiteful. And Carragher, I don't know how he's still got a job with what he did on the M5, I think it was, or the M6, the M62. I can't remember. He flamed at someone. I think Keane just comes across as just generally not a nice individual. Souness comes across as generally not a nice individual. And Neville and Carragher, out of the four of them, I prefer Gary Neville the most, and I don't even like him. But hence, I don't even have Sky, so I'm kind of glad on that. But Gary Neville does come across occasionally and does talk a lot of sense, especially with the current situation, I think. But yeah, they're all just bitter individuals that seem just to hate each other, and it seems like they hate the job they do as well. And Gary Neville didn't have the best managerial career. Out of the three, out of Keane, Neville, Souness, Neville I think is the worst manager out of the three. Keane terrifies me, but he's pretty good as a motivator. I don't think would want to piss him off, so you want to play better just to avoid getting shouted at. And Souness has actually won silverware as a manager. So at management level, it's Souness, Keane, and then Neville's a distant last. On personality level, they're all pretty undesirable characters. And I've met Carragher. I didn't particularly like him when I met him. But the era they, were brought up and they were born, the areas of the country they're from, a lot of them are from very deprived areas. Souness and Carragher, especially from an area that's exceptionally deprived financially, where they grew up, both in Liverpool and Scotland, parts of Scotland. So that's also tempered their personality somewhat, is that you've got to fight to get to the top. But whilst at the top, they weren't particularly nice at the top either. But Sky is a grubby organisation anyway. I mean, look how the Murdoch media empire has operated over the last 40 or 50 years. It's a pretty grubby media organisation. To well, just look at it. Who do I think would make a good pundit? Well, Peter Crouch has done quite well. I think Peter Crouch, he's got his podcast. Robbie Savage has got his podcast as well, and also does work for BT Sport, and they've done quite well. I know everyone agrees with Robbie Savage, but Robbie Savage, I think, as a player, everyone hated him unless you were playing with him. But as a pundit, he comes across differently. I don't know what other ex-players would come across as good pundits. I think a lot of them are giving it a go and not doing very well. I can't stand Rio Ferdinand as a pundit. I'd rather Graham Lasso, I think, needs to get more airtime. He's done quite well on the Pledge podcast and program on Sky News. Graham Lasso, I think, comes across as someone intelligent enough to probably, be a commentator on a variety of sports. He seems to have an appreciation of just what's going on in society as a whole. He seems very, very aware of things around him rather than just football. Graham Lasso is someone I think that the media have overlooked as someone who could, do something. Lee Dixon on the BBC ITV over his punditry career since he's retired. I tolerate him in the sense that when I'm watching an ITV England broadcast or a World Cup or a Euros, it's just like it's Lee Dixon. He's good, but there are better. Broadcasters out there. He's a good ex-player. He was a solid professional. I like Martin Keown. I think Martin Keown, as a player, was a feisty individual. As a commentator and as a pundit, he's very, very intelligent. There are one or two others, but again, these are like going back to the '90s players that I grew up watching. Some of them actually have gone into commentary. A lot of them. Chris Kamara is funny because he sometimes forgets what game he's watching. Chris Kamara, if you are a fan of Sky Sports, Chris Kamara is quite funny, and he's also made some money out of advertising for companies, a little bit of acting. Chris Kamara is quite funny, but on the whole, I think Graham Lasso is probably the best bet for someone who should be presenting or commentating football. Really interesting character. Took a lot of abuse as a player, but he's got a university degree. I think Stuart Pearce should get a little bit more commentary time because he's funny. He doesn't hold back when a player's not playing. I think his first match as Man City manager, he basically called a player a bastard at an interview and said it was a load of bollocks what he had done and he would be disciplined. And then the guy interviewing said, Stuart, you're on live TV. You're going out on 5 Live. You can't say they went bollocks to it. I've just said it, haven't I? And he just didn't care. I think there are a couple, but I think they're all trying to be very similar in how they present themselves. There's not a lot of variation in how they come across. I think Ian Wright's the most colourful. He is funny, but he can be a bit annoying because it's just like that gobby chab in the pub. But he is funny because he's himself. How he is, he's a very colourful character. Graham Lasso, I think, deserves to get a little bit of airtime when discussing football. I do like Robbie Savage when he's on his podcast. It's quite funny because they talk about a variety of sports. And you've got McIntyre, who's a table tennis champion. You've got Freddie Flintoff, who's obviously a world-famous cricketer. They work well together. Peter Crouch, I think, he is quite funny, and he writes a very good media column as well. He's a very good newspaper columnist as well. He's really found a career in that. But no one can stand Martin Tyler. Let's move on from. I'm not a big fan of Sky or BT. So while I have seen broadcasts of Sky and BT, I don't really enjoy how you're paying for a subscription yet you're getting bombarded with more ads than on terrestrial TV. I just don't get that. Sky and BT are demanding to show more live games next season. Then why didn't they bid for those games for this package? I just don't get it. I think I miss the days of like Motson at his peak, John Motson. I miss the days of some of the other commentators on ITV and BBC doing the commentary, and occasionally Channel 5. I do miss the days of certain commentators who didn't need a co-commentate, a play-by-play to help them. They just went for it. They didn't need a colour commentator. There was one commentator commentating. And unfortunately now they seem to think, there's a few commentators who I think are his equal. And there are one or two that are, I think, following in his footsteps. But we are seeing a dumbing down of commentary. We're seeing some very bland commentary. We're seeing a lot of commentators who are basically, they're all the same. This is why I would like to see someone like Graham Lasso, who's gone into a different form of media where he's on a talk show program. getting his chance. I would like to see, um, someone else host Match of the Day other than Gary Lineker and a few other rotated presenters. I really would. Um, but at the same time, I'm tuning out of football. I'm looking at some other sports because I enjoy them more, and there seems to be more flavour in the commentary, more flavour with the ex-player experts. I mean, this is why I like watching the NRL, because you've got Michael Ennis um, there as an expert, and Michael Ennis was one of the biggest grubs in the game, but he's hilarious as a commentator, as an expert. He really does know his stuff, and he's played in State of Origin. He's won grand final. He's played for Australia. Michael Ennis is one of the best ex-players who commentates. He's funny when it comes to rugby league. Dion Dublin. Dion Dublin's not bad actually. Dion Dublin, I think, is underrated as a commentator and as a pundit. I think he's more knowledgeable than some of them, and he also has his other presenting gig on the BBC. It's a property program, but he's branching out from other than sport. So he's marketable in the sense that he's affable. He's like the football version of Ainsley Harriott. They look very, very similar. TV chef. They could almost pass for each other as a doppelganger effect. But no, Dale Dublin, I think he's very intelligent. I think he does know his stuff. And when they do have him on, like, Football Focus, Match of the Day, the World Cup and Euros, when he's there, he does a lot for women's football as well. He's a big supporter of women's football and does a lot for that, does a lot of commentary for that, a lot of expert analysis. I think he's underrated and undervalued as a media presenter, and he's something that I think the broadcasters, doesn't matter if it's subscription or free to wear, they need to look at getting him some more mainstream events like the Euros, like the World Cup, like the FA Cup final, and giving him some more airtime, because he is very, very good. And he did play in a variety of leagues. It wasn't just the Premier League. He did play in the lower leagues as well. And he played on some pretty grotty pitches back in the day. And so he's played at various levels of football. And I think that is a difference that a lot of these Premier League, ex-Premier League players who just played the Premier League don't appreciate, is that lower league level, grinding out on very low pay and playing on some pitches that you wouldn't even allow sheep to graze on, and getting it the hard way. Dion Dublin's one of those characters that he's worked hard to get to the top of his sport, was there for a fair period of time at the top of his sport, and has gone on from playing to the media side of things very, very well, and he does very well for himself. And he's also quite intelligent. Do I still ride my? Yes, I still ride my little Honda. I have to get to work, and of course I'm a key worker, so hence why the videos are not being as much as you would think during this time. My work uniform is the orange stuff down there, so yeah, I'm still. Oh, I haven't actually passed yet. I'm still on my CET, but I've been riding now for 4 years in July. But I've had a few accidents, so I haven't ridden the entire time. And I was looking to do my test in January, but then the virus started to take effect, and then I had to move again. So all you got to do is do your CBT, ride for a bit, get confident, do your theory and do your practical, and then you've got the different levels of A1, A2, and then full A category if you want to go for the big bites. But at the end of the day, it's riding is riding. It doesn't matter what you ride, really, as long as you do it safely. Unfortunately, people tend not to do it safely because they're idiots. Roads, as they are, being nice and quiet. People are hooning around like it's a racetrack, and they're still coming off and still having accidents. Even now, it's just give it up. How's my lips? Oh God, it's another moron. But no, I enjoy riding. But I ride to and from work on my little 125. It's nothing special. It's nothing overly fun. It's just a little 125. It just gets me from A to B. Enjoy riding it. It's interesting to have a question that isn't sport related and it comes back. But do I drive a car? No. Although I am looking at sorting out again, when this virus has passed, I have found a couple of cars that I'm looking at, um, and sorting out doing a license and test and things. I found one or two, and I might get an original Mini. I found one for not a lot of money up the road. Where a friend of mine works, his boss has got a couple of second-hand cars on the lot. Some of them are classic cars. I found an original Mini. I've also found an old 240D Mercedes from the early 80s. Tempted to buy it, but again, it's not the actual purchase of the car; it's the insurance. So and road tax. So I've got to look carefully at that. And at the moment, money's a bit tight, and I'm sort of in limbo about where I'm going to be living in a year's time. So there's a lot on my mind, but I'm not against sorting out driving tests and things like that. But sort of things are a bit in flux at the moment. So we'll see what happens on that. And talking about motorsport, F1, they were meant to bring rule changes in for next season, and they've been pushed back a year because of what's going on and the fact that development will be delayed. And the F1 teams are getting involved with building ventilators and other medical equipment. So the Mercedes F1 team have got involved. I think Red Bull have got involved. Ferrari have shut down their factory to protect their staff. So it's all a bit strange at the moment. F1's actually involved in helping fight this pandemic, but at the same time, the F1 season, race after race, has been cancelled or postponed. So it is what it is. F1, I think they've over-engineered the cars now. I think there's too much tech in it. I think there's less driver skill required in actually driving the thing rather than programming a computer to do a lot of stuff. I don't enjoy it anymore. And the TV rights debate over the fact it's solely on subscription TV now, they've seen a massive drop in viewers and a massive drop in interest. That's something else for discussion going forward with the sport. And Liberty Media now being the owners of the sport, they have to consider, do they solely put it on a subscription, pay-per-view service, or do they open it up to free-to-air again because they are losing viewers? And unfortunately, with the season, being now delayed and possibly not going to take place this year, it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward with F1. Same with Formula E as well. Although Formula E actually got some of their seasons started, they're also in the same boat. And then you've got all the various other motorsport events, touring cars, V8 supercars, motocross, AMA or World Championship, FIM, the rally championships, depending on the country. So it's all a little bit in flux at the moment. Do I think motorsports were more fun pre-2000? I think some categories of motorsport, yes. Superbikes is still superbikes. They're still nutters. The TT is still the TT. Rallying is still rallying. Motocross is still motocross. NASCAR is still NASCAR. Low tech, high speeds. But F1 has lost its magic for me. MotoGP lost its magic when it went solely behind a paywall as well. Even though it's still fun to watch, it's lost its magic in the sense that BT Sport or no, not at all. I think some of the motorsports have lost their magic because of the media rights deals that they have. Others have become more exciting because they're still accessible. I think it's partly to do with the accessibility and the safety aspect. I think you can over sanitize a sport to the point where it's like OTT on the regulations, or OTT on the tech, or OTT on the safety side. And other times it can be pretty bland when the same teams win all the time and there's no mix and match. It's just a couple of cars or bikes that are the best, and the rider just has to get round for reliability. And then it's how the factory teams seem to get all the favourable decisions. This is why MotoGP has also lost it for me, because of Dorna and how they run the sport. Does F1 really do well at marketing themselves? Because if they're losing viewers and losing interest because they've decided to sign a stupid TV deal that everyone was like, well done, you've taken it away from us, then it needs to leads to fans turning their backs. It's proven that more stuff in free to air will increase participation and increase viewership and increase money. When you start putting a paywall in the way, you actually end up harming the sport long term. But that's another thing. That's another gripe of mine. But it is what it is. America needs to market sports like baseball more to the outside world. NFL is only popular in America, with the league is so well marketed. It is to a point, but the NFL does have the London Series. The London Series is well attended, good viewership figures both in the US and in UK and Europe. It's an interesting one. Major League Baseball was really foobarred itself by taking so long to come and do a European-based series in London, delaying that, having it last year to mixed reviews, and obviously now this year having to cancel. And Major League Baseball's beset by scandal anyway. We now have the Astros scandal that could implicate the Red Sox as well. And Major League Baseball, I think, has got its own domestic internal issues. The NHL, while not having a couple of the big networks in the US, on the US side of things, having the media rights, having various media rights to region, that's hampering the NHL, but they do play a very good European international series and is very well supported outside of North America because a lot of the players are from Europe. So the NHL markets itself in the sense that there's a lot of overseas non-North American players playing in the league, and the European leagues are proud of the fact that they've trained NHL players. And the NHL markets itself, it could do a better job of marketing in the US and having that guaranteed two big networks like Fox or NBC having the sole rights in the US market. Major League Soccer is broadcast overseas as well, has a good TV deal overseas, and it's the global sport. Major League Rugby, every game is put in full on YouTube, so they're using social media to their advantage, much like Major League Baseball, and is again viewed quite regularly outside of the US because of the overseas players. But the NFL is marketed really well in the US, yes. But the NFL is also treading a fine line with taking games to Mexico City. The players don't want to do that. They want to have a team in London. I don't think the players want that either, really. And I'm not sure NFL fans would really want that either. I don't know. The fact that they are trying still, even now, to consider having a team permanently in London, I think is madness. And why choose Jacksonville, which is one of the worst teams? They have no fans anyway. And their owner's a knob. But that's another thing entirely. So he kind of a dickhead, but hey, what can you do? Most billionaires are knobs, it seems, these days. Even when they run successful companies and deserve to have made their money, they're still absolutely dickheads. Do I think the T20 Cricket World Cup will go ahead? No. I don't see it going ahead unaltered or moved. And when it's the short format of the game, you have to look at the Indians, you have to look at the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, the Sri Lankans, the West Indies. You have to look at those nations that have really taken to T20 cricket over the last decade or so, and how they have these domestic leagues that are really popular. But I don't think it takes place as scheduled. I think it will either be postponed or cancelled. But we'll see in a month or so's time what the global situation is, and we'll see what the situation is in 3 months' time, and then we'll be able to have an opinion. But looking at how many major sporting events have been called off, cancelled, rearranged, I can't see the T20 World Cup going ahead as planned on time, and that will affect the tournament, because this time next year cricket will be in a different place. There are already discussions about shortening the county championship season here. And then with the IPL and India being shut down, I can't see it taking place as planned on time. But that's my personal opinion. If other major sports are falling by the wayside, and discussions about the financial situation of where sport is at, I can't see how the ICC can forge ahead with this without either changing the format of the tournament to reduce the amount of games, or moving the start date, or even calling it off for this year and rearranging it for another time. British Basketball League on YouTube. I've seen a lot of sports from YouTube. Well, I'm going to call them minor sports when it comes to viewership compared in around the world. A lot of leagues, a lot of teams, and a lot of sports are using YouTube as a method to reach a wider audience. And these are normally leagues with no set TV deal with one broadcaster. The Major League Rugby, for example, uses YouTube, has multiple broadcasters broadcasting sport in various locations. There's no one universal broadcaster. The various elite and national ice hockey teams here in Elite League and National League teams here in the UK, when it comes to ice hockey, they also have their own YouTube channels, and they use that quite effectively to reach a wider audience. I've seen Major League Baseball have got YouTube. They're trying to reach a wider audience. It's all about making a sport as accessible as possible. The issue is, at the moment, with what we're seeing the money bubble burst, not because of the reasons we all expected, but because of this virus. It is highlighted to global sport that fans will not tolerate overpriced tickets, overpriced merchandise, and overpaid players anymore. They just won't. And there was already growing rumblings that fans were less and less happy with the amount of money professional athletes were making and how much money they were having to pay for arena tickets and how much money they were having to pay for TV subscriptions. It's all linked in. We were told when the subscription model came along, it will keep ticket prices low at the turnstiles. It will be more accessible for fans. And the opposite has happened. The ticket price has gone through the roof. The wages have gone through the roof. And the demand from the subscription end for that monthly or yearly or quarterly payments gone up. And fans are just not tolerating it anymore. I think this is the turning point where professional sport needs to look at itself, its structures, its governance, where the money comes from, and how fans that have been put last for so long are back in the forefront again. They have to listen to what fans want. And I think we're going to see some more free-to-wear sport on the television. We're going to see some more accessible streaming online, be it on a paid subscription, which will be a lot less than TV subscription or free streaming services. And I think while ads are going to be a pain in the arse and they're always going to be there, advertisers will look to put pressure on broadcasters and say, look, we want to maximise our advertising revenue, make this free to air. I think there's going to be a change from subscription model to free to air model. I cannot see how the current situation that we have is long term sustainable. And with people's savings being wiped out overnight because of this virus, I cannot see how BT and Sky can keep demanding the money that they're demanding for quite frankly, I'll be honest here, piss poor service. Because it's not. I've seen Sky and BT productions; they're not great. They're not all what they should be with the amount of money they're raking in off hard-working people. If I'm honest, I think we are going to see a change in how sport is consumed and how much we're willing to pay for it. And I think at the end of the day, the players, especially in football, have got to realise they've taken us for a ride for too long, and the gravy train has finally run its course. I think now we're going to see a cap on salaries. We're going to see no more massive transfers for a long time. I think we've reached the point where that transfer record that Neymar set with his transfer to PSG from Barcelona won't be broken. And if it is broken, it will take another generation to do so. I cannot see how fans will tolerate having to pay exorbitant prices for tickets to a product that I think is actually of a lower quality now than what it was 15 years ago. That's my opinion. I think football is of a lower quality now than it was 15 years ago. I think professional sport in general is at a crossroads. And it was going to reach this crossroads regardless of the coronavirus or something else, some other event causing the money bubble to burst. I don't think fans would tolerate constantly paying the amount of money they are paying to absorb their sport. I think we've reached a point. I was checking my messages there. We've reached a point where I think The PR disaster has been football, especially during this coronavirus, and how other sporting bodies as well have dealt with the situation has damaged the reputations and the image of those sports, possibly irreparably going forward. And therefore, I think that's why I think fans and the fee-paying public will not tolerate paying the amount of money for those guys' wages. I don't think they've justified their earnings very well and why they earn so much. They haven't justified themselves very well by only being willing to accept a 30% pay cut. Firstly, the pay cuts come along too little, too late, and the amount of money they're willing to give up is not enough. Not enough. Even when they're willing to accept the pay cut, they're still wanting to make as much money as possible. Well, I understand why they want to protect their wages because they're contracted and their careers are very, very short. The amount they're paid is too much. But then you can have to go back in, I think, 1968 and look at Jimmy Hill. I think leaving football management, going into to run the PFA, and arguing to remove the upper end cap on player wages successfully. It's had some unintended consequences since he's passed away, but I think we're going to see a salary cap of some kind. We're going to see a transfer cap of some kind. They're going to try and level the playing field between all 20 Premier League teams, regardless of promotion relegation, but they're going to try and level the playing field financially. And we are going to see a change in direction of how the sport's governed and the amount of money floating around, because it hasn't worked out, because lower level clubs are going bust. They've said if we don't get help and players don't take pay cuts or pay deferrals, we're going to go out of business. And the EFL is already on the back foot after the handling of the Berry situation and how they dealt with that. And we know other clubs are also in real serious financial difficulty at this time. So football and the FA and UEFA and all these various, federations around Europe have got to tread very carefully about how they deal with this current stoppage in play and how they deal with it going forward. The recycling still hasn't been collected. Jesus. At this point, if your council services are being affected, you should have had contact from your council to you via letter or email or text message to explain the situation. I am surprised that, I'm assuming it's Swindon Council, haven't sent out a circular, which is a letter or an email, to all residents, all council taxpayers in the last week or so, explaining the situation. But you are not the only council, not the only area. Thing is, I was about to wind this live stream up as I thought, I've got to look at Major League Baseball cancelling the. I'm surprised Swindon Council haven't at this point contacted you and explained the situation. I'm a council worker, yes, I'm a bin man. We're constantly getting changing directives from our office and from council and from the company that runs the service that we do over, health and safety and regulation and all that. We're constantly getting updates on what could possibly be curtailed and a whole variety of things. I am surprised that Swindon Council hasn't, contacted residents and said, look, even if it's just by leafleting through letterboxes and said, look, this is the situation, these are the services that we are restricting, these are the ones that we're. Recycling isn't health added to a point. However, if it does build up, then it becomes an issue when you have a lot of bin bags full of it, and then birds, rats, mice, badgers, foxes, all that, stray cats, stray dogs, they rip open the bin bag and spread it round. And then you do start having a litter problem, and litter eventually does affect the ecosystem. It's not as bad as non-recyclables and food and garden, but it does get to a point, where they will have to look at taking it at some point. But they still should have contacted you and said that this is the situation. I'm very, very sorry, but due to staffing or advice, whatever it is, we're focusing on getting rid of the more harmful waste that is produced rather than just recycling. But it will get to a point where they will have to collect it or figure out a way, because it's just going to build up. And then when things get back to normal, a lot of the staff are probably going without holiday. I'm putting in for some holiday when this is over. So they're going to be staffing issues when the crisis is over. All these bin men and women who work pretty hard, which we have, want to take holiday. Um, but it's up to the council to communicate to the residents there is an issue. We're working on it. This is what we are taking. This is what we're not taking. Please bear with us. Blah blah blah. It's just some kind of notification. But as we know with local and national government, there's oversights and there's mistakes. It happens, but it is what it is. As long as the nasty stuff's taken, I don't think you should complain too much. But you have to still ask the question why you haven't contacted us over it. It is what it is, though. I mean, it is a difficult situation that I'm working in, and yeah, I was going to do some videos last night. I fell asleep, got in, and conked out. I was out. I was out of it by like half 4. I was planning to do some videos. And I fell asleep last night. Yes, I'm still going to work. I'm still a frontline key worker. It's still not pleasant. And you know, it is a pain in the arse. There's no sport on to like unwind in the afternoon, but it is what it is. And we will get there eventually. We will get there. But I had the question earlier. What I think the first sport to come back onto mainstream, start playing again. I think it's going to be one of the winter sports, one of those minority winter sports. I think European ice hockey. I think because their season's finished earlier than the NHL. I think they could possibly be the first sports to start up again when they can. And have some kind of normality, whether they have a slightly reduced pre-season and regular season, and they rejig the season somewhat. I think they're going to be the leagues and sport that get back to normal the quickest. I would also think that UEFA are still trying to push through and complete the European club season. There's going to be a completely rearranged 2020-2021 season. But I will say this. When it comes to international football, next year's Euros are possibly going to be, I think, the best we would have we'll ever see. Do I know anyone's actually died from coronavirus? Yes, I do. Ironically, over in Italy. Not overly well, but I know who they are. My aunt's family know them quite well. So I have met them in the past when I used to go over there. Didn't know very, very well. But yes, I do know people who unfortunately not got through this crisis. It is a shame. But at the same time, people are still not following the various advice given out by various governments and various authorities to take precautions unless they have to go to work and all that kind of stuff. I see it every day. I see more joggers and cyclists now than I did last summer, this time last year on the bins. I do not know where these people are suddenly. I haven't exercised for 20 years. Something to do. People are treating this like an extended holiday. Some people, because they have got a retained salary, they don't have to go to work, or if they can work from home, they can work what hours they want. And it's going to take until someone really high profile dies. Let's go for a sports star. Okay, let's say a high profile athlete who was still active. Okay, hasn't retired. They're still an active, let's say, boxer, swimmer, cyclist, football player, rugby player, ice hockey player. It's going to take for a high profile sports star to lose their life to this. I think or a really high profile celebrity to die from it, for people to. I mean, I think the guy from I think the lead singer of what's the band called who did Stacey's Mum? He's dead. He died. And people are just still not getting the hint. This is killing people. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, it's not a joke. It's going to take for a really well-known sports star or other celebrity to die from it for people to suddenly wake up. And it shouldn't be the case. It should, but there's no sport on the TV at the moment, which is the shame. And there is no escape for people. Yeah, I forget the band that did Stacey's Mum. Not the Rembrandts. It's oh God, who is Stacey's Mum? It's in my head as well. It's on the tip of my tongue now. It's Fountains of Wayne. That's the band. The lead singer of Fountains of Wayne has passed away. They weren't an overly famous band, but the song's quite famous. And yeah, even now people are still not taking this current event seriously. And the longer people don't, the longer it's going to take to tackle the situation and get on top of it. And the longer it means before sport can start again. Now, provisional dates for sport starting up may vary from sport to sport, but I would say anywhere between, I'm going to say late July and September is when we could see sport wake from its slumber. That's my personal opinion. I know there are plans to try and get sometime in May or June. I think that's highly optimistic. I really do. I think it's very optimistic. But we know the Chinese Super League is looking to restart in a couple of weeks. So if you're a football fan and you have free sports and Premier Sports, you could be looking at watching some Chinese Super League matches very, very soon. And free sports have got a little coup there. They've really, with their parent company Premier Sports, really picked up something because people just want to watch sport now, any sport, as a distraction from the situation. I don't know how much money they've signed for that TV deal. They probably will sell the rights on Sky or BT and make even more money, but they've picked up that little nugget there. The fact that the NRL and AFL want to get done and started again sometime in June, July, I think again is highly optimistic. I think professional sport is living in a bubble, and it shows, how overly reliant they are on the TV revenue, and how the fan is not, being put first. I find that funny. China start it, then their professional sports take over. The Chinese Super League is not a good league. It's a very fixed league. There's corruption in it, which is well known about, but it's something. It's not good quality football, though. It'll be quite funny to watch how bad they are, but it's not good quality football because it's all fixed. But it'll be interesting to see some sport on the television. But bear in mind, China is 3 months ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to lockdown and the lockdown measures and easing restrictions and getting people back to normal. So if we took them a 3.5 month period, that's roughly what we're looking at over here is a 3.5, 4 month period. And we're only 2 weeks into it here in the UK. Italy's a month into it. Spain, all that. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, maybe longer. But if we're going by how the Chinese have dealt with it and how quickly, we're looking at restrictions on travel, which will affect professional sport, especially when we've been told by UEFA the Champions League and Europa League are on indefinite hold. We may not see Champions and Europa League football for another year and a half. I don't think we see any European Cup football until after the Euros is done. That's a season and a half. That's a year and a half until we see European transcontinental club football. I think there are going to be travel restrictions in place for a while. I think I think we are going to see a slow easing of restrictions. Some of the experts say a peak is expected in the next few days, couple of weeks, and then we're going to see a slow easing of restrictions as we go through the summer. I would say by July, June, July, we'll be nearly back to normal. August, I think, is when we start really getting back to normal. September is when we wake from our slumber and we go from there. I think the sports side of things, the Chinese Super League, I don't think it will be necessarily mixed quality. I think they are professional standard. It's just we know there's massive corruption allegations against the league. We know that there's match fixing that's known about, and then that affects the integrity of the sport. So it'll be interesting to see, if there's any lopsided results or pretty strange games, because now it's getting a global spotlight. Whereas before it was a national spotlight in China. Now, if it's on the European TV and it's being shown globally, it's going to be in a global spotlight, and then that's where games that look suspicious get pinged more. And because people are sports mad public are desperate for just anything, they're going to watch it, and then there's more eyes watching that. Will raise questions if there's a suspicious match or two. Japanese rugby, I don't think, is the worst in the world. I think it's a pretty decent standard. And again, with how the World Cup went, I think Japanese rugby has definitely come leaps and bounds in the last decade, and rightly deserves to have had that World Cup. Rightly deserves to have been great hosts, and it was a great tournament. It is a shame that the Olympics has been shifted back a year, but I think again at the same time, a lot of these athletes will probably be fitter and healthier next year than they are now, and we may see one of the best Olympics of all time next year. We definitely, I think, in my view, see one of the best Euros next year for quality of football, let alone the fact it's across the continent, which is a shame. So I think 4 different time zones, but I think we are going to see some really good quality football next summer because of this delay in hosting the tournament by a year, and the current break we're having. Players are going to heal from injuries and be rested, and I think we are going to have a disjointed season, a shorter season next season. I think we could see some players really develop quite quickly together, and we could see some very, very good football next year. Also, next year's the Rugby League World Cup. Now, if we have all these rejigging of tournaments and then leagues facing financial pressures, it could be interesting to see what happens to the Rugby League World Cup next year. I'm going to have to look into that, and how will this current NRL and Super League not playing, how will that actually affect the Rugby League World Cup next year? Because I think, again, that could be a really great tournament. I think with players having these extended breaks and having a shortened season next season, I have no doubt, and also a shortened season this season, they're going to be playing less games, which would mean less wear and tear on the body, and we could see a lot of players who would otherwise not make it, not be fit enough, possibly be injured. Suddenly, we have every player available to play who can, and I think that's going to be in competition for places and training camps. And so I think we could see some really, really top quality rugby league next year in the World Cup. I think it could be a better tournament than 2017 for play, at least. I know crowd numbers were a bit disappointing in Australia at times, but I think we could have a better tournament next year than we did 3 years ago. But I'm going to leave that there. I've waffled on long enough. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it all. Place any more if you. I will obviously be doing some more videos on a few topics later on this evening, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But thank you very much for the questions, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.